Hello and welcome to another episode of Be Leaders, and we have a great treat for you tonight. My guest is a policeman who joined in 2004, and by 2006 he went through a life-threatening event, and by 2015 he was diagnosed with PTSD, and he's joining me today, Brett Calman, to share my vision of breaking the stigma with mental health. So a big warm welcome for Brett Calman, who's going to be joining me in just a second. So, Brett, welcome. As it says on the screen, welcome to you to Be Leaders. It's really great to have you here. It's very important to have somebody who's going to be talking about PTSD on this show. A lot of our guests are involved in some wellness at one point or another, but my passion at the moment is breaking the stigma. And so someone like yourself who's in, for want of a better word, I'm going to say a very macho profession, even though, of course, women are in the profession. As an ex-cop myself, I understand what it's like to be in the force. And sometimes, just the same as in the army or any of the other emergency services, it's hard for the personnel when they're going through something of mental health to come forward and use the psychological services. So I'm really pleased, first of all, Brett, to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here and share my story, and I really appreciate it.
So just before we kind of get into the whole story, for people watching this, they might not even know anything about the police apart from what they see on the streets. So for yourself, how long, you went in 2004, what kind of brought you to sign up for the police force?
I think being a police officer, I think you're born to be a police officer. I've said that from day one. I don't think it's a type of profession where you just kind of an accountant one day and say, I think I'm going to be a police officer. I think you're born with that type of drive inside of you to go out there, want to help people. You're running towards danger when everybody else is running away. And I think that has to be a part of you. Like it's hard to explain, but if you hear about things on the news and you say, well, there's no way I can do that, or there's no way I can run towards that, it's probably not the job for you. I've always had a passion for helping people. It's something that's always intrigued me about being on the police department. And when I was younger, I used to watch cop shows all the time, and I used to be fascinated with it and say, one day I want to be like that officer running around and going after bad guys. And I've been fortunate for the last 17 years, I've been able to do that.
And what part of the police force are you actually in?
I'm in the uniform patrol. So I drive a police car. I'm on the streets. I deal with everything from shoplifters to thefts to homicides. I've been doing that for almost 17 years straight. I did a little bit of work in the detective office. I worked a little bit undercover, but I had a real passion for just being on the streets and driving around. I've worked in several different areas throughout the region in which I patrol, and it's just a passion I have, and I love it. And I think every officer should do that for quite a while and get the experience and the knowledge of being on the road. And there's nothing like being out there and helping people.
So there's a lot of passion coming across and the idea of helping people. But on the other side, scary business, I would say. I mean, you're out there right on the coalface of crime and dealing with the bad guys and the bad girls. There's a lot of stress and distress, I would imagine, a lot of adrenaline, and a lot of fear. So before we get into anything else, how do you on a daily basis for 17 years handle that daily distress, just getting into your vehicle, off you go, having totally no idea of what the day is going to serve up to you? That's a scary business, Brett.
It is very scary, and it's one of these things where I know we can get killed any day. When you put that uniform on and you leave your house, that could be your last day. I have a wife, 2 children. I've been my wife for 26 years. I have 2 daughters, and I will not leave my house without kissing my girls and saying goodbye. There have been a few incidents that have been pretty close, death encounters. I've had a lot of fights. I've had a lot of injuries. I can even say 2 weeks ago, I got bit in my hand.
Wow.
Arrested individual. So it is a rough job. I have a side business that I do on my days off. I work only half a year. That's a schedule that we work on. We work on a 2-day, 2-night rotation. So I work 4 out of 8 days. Exercise. I don't drink. I don't smoke. Stay away from that stuff. But you really have to have a strong mindset. It's difficult. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. It's coming home sometimes. It's a rough day. We see a lot of death from children to the elderly, and it impacts you. It's hard.
I'm sure you see a lot of death and a lot of horrific death. Were you kind of adrenaline driven before you joined the police force?
I was. Now, I'm not the type of guy that's going to jump out of an airplane and parachute. That's not for me. I'm scared of heights. Saying that, you do have a bit of an adrenaline rush. It's going to work, not knowing what's going to happen. Every day is different, and that's what I love about policing. Is when I go to work, every single day is different.
In 2004, you actually joined the police department and didn't know that only 2 years later, you were going to go through a day that you thought you were actually going to die. What was that?
So, funny enough, that was actually a fire call. As police officers, we deal with robberies and shootings and stabbings and whatnot. For me, back in 2006, I attended a large house fire. And when I was going to this call, I was told by my dispatchers that there were large propane tanks in the garage of this house. When I got there, this house was a complete inferno. And it was the middle of the night. There was nobody around. It was all quiet. And I was by myself. And when I look back and looked at the report, it was 6 minutes that I was on scene by myself, which is a long time when every minute seems like an hour. I was frantically trying to get people out of their homes that were sleeping that night. But all I can think of were these propane tanks. And I was waiting for them to explode. And I knew if those propane tanks exploded, the house would have blown up and I would have been gone. So every minute that went by, I was literally felt like I was playing chicken with my life. And, there were a lot of factors. It felt like I was in a war zone. It felt like there was a volcano erupting in front of me. Ashes were falling down from the sky. Several more houses were catching on fire because it was the houses were all in close proximity to each other. It was a residential area, so the roofs on the houses behind, the houses beside, they were all catching on fire, and there was nobody out. And I was by myself. And again, just over and over and over in my head, I kept saying to myself, this house is going to explode, and it's going to take me with it.
Wow.
Thankfully, it did. Hence, I'm here today. But it impacted me more than I thought it would.
All right, so we're going to get to that in a minute, and you even wrote a book about this whole situation. But I'm going to slow things down because there's no doubt that you've told this story many, many times. But what I'd like to get into is, let's take it little by little to see how the scene actually developed inside you, if you don't mind. So as you were on the way after you got the call, and you had that kind of initial information, and you're driving towards the fire, what is going through your mind, and what are you feeling in your body at that point before you arrive? What's happening?
Nothing more of, I'm not going to say excitement. I'm going to say there's a rush of getting to a call. I knew I was going to be the first car there, but I didn't know what to expect. I've never been to a large fire like that before. Again, I was only on for a couple of years, so I never attended something like that. So I didn't have much to go on when I was going to that. Now it's
right.
So
you're on the way. This is a first, this is a bit of a first.
Yeah.
You want to get there as quickly as possible, but you've been in events where you have to drive fast to get there before, and you arrive on scene. Describe to me what you see and what it's doing to you when you see this inferno for the very first time.
I almost froze for a minute. I couldn't believe how big this fire was. We're talking around close to 2,500, 2,800 square foot home that was completely engulfed from the ground to the sky. And all I saw was a wall of flames. It is so loud. It is so hot. You can feel the heat coming from the house. You can hear the crackling of the wood, windows popping, the glass shattering. All these things you can hear. And I remember getting on my radio and saying, I need more officers there, but I couldn't hear my dispatcher because even though I had my radio on, the loudest it can go, a fire is so loud. Like, if you go to a fire pit in your backyard, you can hear the crackling of the wood, or if you have a fireplace in your home and you put the wood in, you hear the cracking of the kindling and whatnot. Well, imagine that on a full home.
Wow.
Nobody around and it's dark. So all you see is the flames. And I'm not far away from it. I'm 30, at one point, 20 feet away, 15 feet away from this house. And I didn't in my head, there's those propane tanks. It stuck with me. And I remember her saying that.
So you're there. There's this sight before you that you've never experienced before. You know that there's explosives basically inside, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't know really what that's about. You're not a fireman, you're a policeman, right? So you're not really trained in all that. People? Was there any people in this house?
Yeah.
Or
I didn't know. So I got the call. When that call came in, I was on the street. I was just a general patrol. So I was just driving around. I had nothing to do before. So I was actually right by the street when the call came in. So I was literally 30 seconds away from the house. When I got there, there was nobody around. There was nobody outside. I didn't know if anybody was in the house. My first instinct was I couldn't get inside that house. It was an inferno. So there was no way I was going in there. My only goal, my only hope was to get people out on either side of the house. But then there were the homes behind as well. So in a way, I felt like I was kind of playing God. Like, do I go to the left or do I go to the right? Which way do I go? And which home do I go to first and try to wake the people up and get them out? And that really bothered me for years as well, because I felt like I was playing God, even though I'm not. As you said, I'm not a firefighter. I'm a police officer. And I ended up going to the house to the left. And the flames, I was literally 5-6 feet away from the house. And the flames were so intense. I had to give up and then go to the house to the right because I figured I would just burn to death. The flames would hit me.
Did anybody on either side get hurt?
Nobody did.
So, okay, thank God for that. So you're there. I just want to bring you back to the scene. So you're there. You've got the idea of the explosives inside. You're not sure if there's anybody inside or not. The noise is excruciating. The light must be hypnotizing almost. And you kind of almost froze, you said. What do you do next, apart from going to these houses? What do you do? What are you thinking?
I was thinking two things: try to get people out, and when am I going to die?
So this idea of I'm maybe die, or when am I going to die? It's a little bit more than I may die. Is that already going through your mind?
Yes. I knew. I think at one point I came to the realization this house is going to blow, and it's going to take me with me.
Wow. So when you've got a thought like that, and you're there, and you're in the middle of it, what are you feeling inside? What's the actual body sensations that you're feeling?
I was just in go mode. I was still banging on the houses. I was frantic. I was banging on the homes, trying to get people up and say to myself, okay, who can I wake up? Who can I get out of their house before I'm gone? And then the next thing I know, again, it was 6 minutes. The next thing I know, I see another officer rolling up down the street.
So when you see help is arriving, does that help you in any way, or are you worried now for them?
He was smart. He parked far down the street. I parked in front of the house. He parked further down. But I remember his face. He came out of his car and he was like, oh my God. I heard him just screaming, and how big the fire was, how it spread to the other homes. He was down the street. He just started knocking on doors as well and trying to get people out.
So I'm not yet getting a sense that you're actually feeling apart from the thought that you might die or you will die at one point, I'm not getting the feeling from you that you're actually got fear because you're busy doing stuff.
I am in fear. It's multiple emotions.
Right. Tell me
about fear. I've got panic. I've got stress. I've got to do my job as a police officer. Up front, more than anything, I have to get my job done, and my job is to protect life and save lives. That's my job. I know I'm not a firefighter, but it wasn't really until afterwards when everybody showed up and I went back into my police vehicle. I sat there, and that's when it hit me.
Okay, so Brett, just before we get to there, just for everyone listening and for me too, because we're in the middle of suspense here. So you're running around trying to get everyone out. Take us a little bit towards the end before you actually go down and sit down at the end of the event. What happened between then and the end?
More officers showed up. Fire department showed up. I think there were close to 5 or 6 trucks that showed up. And at that point, it's almost like you get tapped out. So again, the fire department comes and says, we've got this. And I move back to the street and I let them do their thing. They're trained for it. People started coming out of their homes now, and I don't know if it was from all the sirens that woke them up, or the house that woke them up, or the smell of the fire, the smoke that woke them up. I don't know. But literally within 10 minutes, the street was just full of people on either side of the street. Were out of their homes now. And then the fire department was there, and they were able to take that over.
So you get tapped out, you go back to the car. So just before you tell us what happened, because this is where everything starts to unroll in a way, we've got a question from somebody watching from Denise Journo. How does your family cope with you being at risk all the time? How do your wife, especially your wife, I don't know how much your children understood when they were younger, but how does your wife cope with that every day? You kiss them goodbye. You kiss them goodbye as if it's your last goodbye.
Yeah.
How does she get through? How do you get through a marriage like that?
Difficult. You have to have a very strong relationship. My wife and I, again, we've been together for 26 years, and I've been an officer for 17. So she's known me before I was a police officer. And when I wanted to switch careers, I sat down with her, and we had a long conversation. And I said, I think I want to become a police officer. It's a dream of mine. But I need you to back me up 100%. And it can't be 99. And, if you don't back me up, that's fine. I'll still doing what I'm doing at the time. I was working as an upholsterer, making furniture, and I'll continue to do that. But it's not a job that you can say, well, I'll back you up 90% of the time. She has to back you up 100% of the time. And it's very difficult. It is hard because a lot of times, half the year, she's a single mother because I'm working shift work. Yeah. So you have to have that.
She married an upholsterer, which gives me visions of, kind of easy little radio playing in the back there. Yeah. You hammering the nails, you're doing the furniture. It seems to be very kind of mindful profession. And yet her husband turns into this kind of night rider guy who's out there, and she never knows if he's going to come back every time. When you arrive home, I mean, do you see a sense of relief on her face?
Yeah. We have a thing where even to this day, 17 years later, my wife still wants me to call her every couple hours just to check in, send that text message, which we could do now, which 17 years ago we couldn't do because there was no cell phones. Yeah. But with technology, it makes things a little easier, where I can text every couple hours, say, hey, I'm okay. I know if I go to a car accident where someone's being killed, or I go to a homicide, and I know I'm going to be tied up for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, I'll send her a text message just saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to be tied up for the next 5 or 6 hours. You won't be able to get a hold of me, but I'm just going to this call. I'm okay. And I'll kind of let her know. So we have that relationship there where I can do that, especially now with the technology with cell phones. I can video chat my kids now before they go to bed. If I'm working a night shift and there's nothing going on and I'm sitting in the car, I can video them and, kiss them goodnight, tell them I love them, and continue on my night.
Wonderful. And I see there's a smile on your face when you kind of tell me this. So it sounds to me that you've got a very loving relationship with your wife.
I do. If we didn't, we wouldn't be together still to this time, because this journey was hard. And I know this journey was very hard. It's hard on me. It was very hard on her as well.
So you're sitting in the car after you've been tapped out. What's happening now?
Now I'm getting the adrenaline rush, the adrenaline dump, sorry. All the emotions are now starting to come up. I still had to do a report in my car. So I knew I had to do my job, but I literally sat there and just took a couple of breaths in and said, how am I still alive? Like, I just couldn't believe I was still alive. I started doing the report in my car, and then my shift was over. And I remember coming home, and I'll never forget, I came home, I crawled into bed. It was around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I just lied beside my wife. And I think I just started even tearing or crying. And I was like, I can't believe I'm alive. What I went through, it was a nightmare. And it's hard because spouses will never fully understand what we're going through and what we're doing. And that's the hard part as well, is, who's going to understand what we're going through besides other police officers?
So I just want to understand, between the time when you're sitting in the car and you're getting that kind of adrenaline dump and you get into bed next to your wife, which I would imagine gives you a sense of safety of some sort, what were you feeling? Are you shaking? Are you sweating? Are you just kind of going over the scene again and again, or are you completely blank? What's happening between then and you going home?
I'm just picturing myself standing in front of that house, just replaying it over and over and over in my head, standing there and looking at this house and hearing the crackling of the wood, the smashing of the windows, the heat of the fire, the noise of the roar of the flames. It was just replaying over like a record, over and over and over in my head. And that's what I was thinking about for weeks on end.
So you're in bed with your wife in the morning, can't believe you're still alive. And this is in 2006.
Correct.
And something happened between now and 2015 when you eventually got a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. So kind of run us through what's going on with you between 2006 and 2015. My goodness, it's a hell of a long time.
It's a long time. So for the first couple of years after that, so from 2006 to 2008, I would avoid fire calls. If there was imagine like a square A, B, C, and D. If the call I was at number A and I had to go to B, I would just go the long route to get to it. And I prayed that I'd get called off, that some other officer would go and call me off. So for 2 years, I avoided fire calls. And then my wife said to me, you know what, I think it's time you go speak to somebody. And we have an employee assistance program where, government workers can call up, and it's free healthcare here in Canada. And you can call up and you can see someone and speak to them regarding what was going on. a social worker. So I spoke to somebody a couple of times, and they said to me, you have to embrace the fire call, and you survived and whatnot. And I met somebody a couple of times, and I thought that was good advice. So I kind of left it on the back burner in my head for a few years. And I didn't really think about it too much until 2015.
So what's happening? What are you apart from when you spoke to the social worker and they said you got to embrace the fire calls? Did you embrace the fire calls?
No. So no. I did. I know what she was saying, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah,
I was nervous. Saying that, I never attended a large fire like that until 2015. And don't forget, as police officers, we deal with many different types of calls, and fire calls are not a very popular call that we go to. That's more the fire department. We're dealing with all the other types of crime out there and whatnot, and not going to fire calls. So I didn't attend another similar fire call until 2015.
Right. So are you getting any, apart from the avoidant bit, are you getting any nightmares? Are you getting any flashbacks? Or you're getting any kind of, I don't know, the shakes? Or is anything happening to you between 2006 and 2015?
No. It almost kind of went away.
It kind of went away.
It went away. It didn't, obviously, but
yeah.
I was able to block it from my head, and from 2008, 9 to 2015, I pretty much blocked it out.
All right. So what happened then in 2015?
So 2015, I got dispatched to another fire call. This was a house under construction over 5,000 square feet. So we're talking a mansion. It was fully engulfed. I rolled up on scene, and somehow I got time warped right back to 2006.
Wow, okay.
My police vehicle, and ashes were falling all over me. And I just saw this huge house fully engulfed, nobody around outside. There was already a couple of officers that were on scene. They were running around trying to get people out of their homes. I just stood there. And my heart started racing a million miles an hour. I was sweating. My palms were sweaty. And I just stood there and I froze and I couldn't do a thing. Eventually, after I just had to get back into my police car, I drove down the street away from the fire, and I blocked one of the roads and just sat in my cruiser. And it was for 3 hours. I just sat there in my cruiser. I couldn't even breathe. I was having trouble breathing. I was having a panic attack. I was literally having my first ever panic attack. I felt like I was back in 2006. It felt like it was a hollow.
It threw you all the way back. Did you have visions of you being back there as well?
Yes.
Yeah. But this time, you were having a totally different reaction to it than back in 2006.
That's right.
This was like your whole body was going out of control for you.
It was. I took out my notebook and I tried to write in it. And I had my pen and paper. And as I was writing, my hands were shaking so bad. I literally couldn't get one word down into my notebook. And I remember taking my notebook and I just tossed it in the car. And I couldn't even write in it. I couldn't calm myself down.
So what are you thinking at this point?
I was just thinking of that call back in 2006. Of just standing there and all those emotions and feelings that I had was just coming back again. But this time it was like, again, sitting in my car, even at this call in 2015, ashes were falling, smoke and debris goes up in the air. And it was coming down, and the ashes, I could see them all falling around my cruiser onto my windshield or whatnot.
Do you think now that you're going to die, or that thought didn't come in?
That thought didn't come in. I knew I wasn't going to die because I was far away from the house.
And I take it you've never had before that panic attacks and this kind of body reaction that you were having sitting in the car?
Never. I've never experienced this in my life.
And was that in itself frightening?
It was. Because I didn't know how to calm myself down. right? I didn't know how to relax. Like, I didn't know what to do. My hands were shaking. My heart was beating so fast. I was sweating. I was having a full-out panic attack in my cruiser for hours.
So did you afterwards tell anybody about this?
No. I didn't.
What went through your mind not to tell anyone about it? Because I want this to also, somebody watching this who's in a similar situation, whether they're in the emergency services, whether they're the police person, whether they're in any other job and they're having a similar or, that kind of episode that you've gone through. Do you approach somebody in your work or not? Why didn't you?
It's that macho feeling of, I'm a police officer. You have to be tough. You have to have thick skin. You didn't die. Just kind of suck it up and move on to the next call. That was my feeling of, I can't show weakness.
I can't show weakness. So what happened between then when you actually went out and asked for help? And who from?
Yeah, so I didn't miss a day of work. I continued to work. And then I attended 3 more fire calls within 2 weeks after that.
Wow.
2015. I was suffering from horrible nightmares, flashbacks. My life was spiraling out of control. All I can think about day and night was flames. I would be sitting in my cruiser and I would see a wall of flames. I would be going to the supermarket with my wife and I wouldn't be able to go inside because all I would see is a wall of flames. I'd be at a call, I'd be at a domestic, hearing a husband and wife arguing, and all I would see in front of me was a wall of flames. It was getting, years ago, I always say to myself, I can never fathom how somebody would commit suicide. How can a police officer get to such a dark place, or a firefighter or a paramedic or a nurse or a doctor? How could it get so dark that they end up killing themselves? I can see it now. Wow. There was one night, I remember I was lying in bed and I just couldn't get the flames out of my head. And I wish I had a knife. And I kind of wanted to stick it in my head and just pop my brain out. And I put my brain on the side table so I can go to sleep.
Oh my goodness.
When I knew now at that point, things were getting scary. I think the straw that broke the camel's back for me was one night I got into a fight, an argument, I should say, with my wife. And it was over the silliest thing, just sewing a button onto my police jacket. And PTSD, which I've learned is also, anger is one of the symptoms. And I got so angry and so irate over this button because my wife said to me, well, why didn't you tell me earlier? And I'm like, well, I forgot. And she got upset because it was late at night. And now she had to do this and not go to bed. But I needed it done. We ended up getting in a verbal argument. And I started yelling. And she said to me the next day, I was petrified of. She goes, wow. I've never seen you that angry in my entire life. And she goes, I thought you were going to hit me. And right there, I said, okay, I got a problem.
And so who do you go for help?
There was a sergeant that I worked with. She was almost like the mother. She had that motherly vibe to her on our platoon. And one night I sent her a message and I said, can we meet and chat for an hour? And I started telling her all the things that were going on with me. And it was hard to open up, but I was comfortable with her. She is always an easygoing person, easy to talk to. And I said, okay, I got to get help. What am I going to do? So I reached out to her. So
she's a peer, right? She's not a commander or she's not a psychologist. She was one of your peers that you'd obviously identified as someone that you could trust. And what was the help that you managed to get then?
Over some time, I got into a place called the Trauma Center, which specializes with emergency service workers. And through her, she said, have you tried reaching out to them, the Trauma Center? And I called them and I said, I'm looking for help. Could somebody help me? They called me back. They hooked me up with a worker there. And to this date, I still go. I go once a month for help still.
And how did your employers treat this, or do they not know? Well, they obviously know now, but at the
They
time.
knew. So they knew. So when I told my sergeant what was going on, she made it very clear that we do need to notify my work because it is a workplace injury, as they say. Even though it's a mental health, it's still a mental health injury. It's the same as breaking your leg. You break your leg on the job, or you get PTSD from the job. It's the same thing. So I notified my work, and my work was actually fantastic about it. They were really supportive with it.
That's wonderful. And so what is anyone else listening who's in that area, or what is the details of that trauma center that you got help from? How did they get in touch with them?
So there were a number. So other officers that I know have gone there to seek help for calls that they've attended. So I called them and I said, I'm a police officer. This is where I work. This is what happened to me. It was short detail of what happened. I need to speak to somebody. And I remember my first session with my therapist. I said to her, if you can't help me, I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm going down.
Great. And somebody wanting to contact them today, is it just on the internet? You put in trauma center?
Yeah, you can go to the trauma center. They're in Southern Ontario. So somebody can log on, give them a call. Their phone number's on the internet. Yeah, you can give them a call. They'd be great.
So tell me a little bit about your treatment from then until today, and you go every month also. So how were you treated then for PTSD?
There were a lot of clinical things that were done. I don't know them all, but I had an EMDR therapy, which was done. There was a lot of different types of therapy that were done. One of them was exposure therapy. We actually went to the Toronto Fire Department training facility in downtown Toronto. And we went there a couple of times to get exposed to different fires. Just, one time was me standing in the tower, just watching the flames. And it was very hard to do. I had homework. We have a fire pit, like a gas fire pit in our backyard with a pool and whatnot. And part of my therapy was sitting around the gas fire pit, turning it on, watching the flames, getting close to the flames, retelling my story over and over and over again was part of my therapy because I didn't talk about it for 9 years, 8 years. I didn't talk about it to anybody. So part of it, getting my story out there as well.
So there's a lot of exposure therapy. There's EMDR, which is desensitization with using the eyes and so on. And did nightmares go? The flashbacks did that work?
Yeah, it took a long time. It took a long time. There were setbacks here and there during my therapy. I never missed a day of work. It was very important to me to keep working during this time. I never went off on stress leave. That's not who I am. I'm built to keep going. So I never missed a day of work, and I kept going. And there were setbacks, but yeah, the nightmares subdued. And I'm proud to say to this day, I'm still attending fire calls. So,
do you still have today a diagnosis of PTSD?
I think it's something that will never go away. I think it's always with me now, and I've accepted it, and I have coping mechanisms to deal with it. I can say last summer, I was dispatched to another house fire, and there were 2 disabled people inside the house. I don't know what got over me, but I actually ran into that burning house twice and pulled 2 people out of the burning house. Wow. So I think I've come full circle, and I think my therapy has helped with that. I'm on a very minor medication just for anxiety for the last couple of years now, which has helped, I think, a lot as well. But the nightmares have stopped and whatnot. And I guess, as of last summer, running into a burning house a couple of times, I think I've proved to myself now that I can overcome it. But I think, you have to want to get the help. You have to fight for yourself. I'm a very big believer in that you can't rely on somebody else. If you have a problem, you have to acknowledge you have a problem, and 2, want to get the help.
And so you wrote a book about all this. What's your book called?
So my book is called PTSD. I have it here, Road to Recovery, a police officer's story. So I started writing that around 2018. I thought, you know what? I was feeling better at that time. I wasn't having the nightmares anymore. And I've always been the type of person that likes to try to help somebody else. And I've been to suicides of paramedics before. We've had officers commit suicide before. You're constantly hearing about police officers taking their own lives. And I'm at that stage of my life now and my career that I am not worried what somebody thinks of me. I am good about talking about my story, what happened to me. And if sharing my story can help one other person out there, potentially save their lives, then it's all worthwhile. And I decided it took me a few years to write this book, but I wrote it hoping that somebody out there will read it and say, you know what, I'm not alone. And if this officer can do it and he can get through it, then I can as well.
And so this book will definitely, I think, help lots of people who read it. And I recommend that anyone watching here goes out and buys it. Would you get it on Amazon, on bookshops? Where do you get that?
You can get it on Amazon worldwide. It's available. I have a website, brettcalman.com. It's available on there as well. But yeah, Amazon's the big one. The book is actually great because it actually has passages from my wife throughout the book as well. So it's got passages from her explaining and how she feels through my process, what she was experiencing, what the kids were experiencing when I was going through this. Also, my therapist wrote a chapter of the book as well, explaining the therapy that she did on me. So there's a bunch of people, a bunch of us that have our hands in this book, not just my words, but my wife's words and my therapist's words are in there as well.
So I think that's a very important point, because it's not only from the person who's experiencing the PTSD, but from the family side, they were experiencing, and also from the therapist side. So this is a book also for, I think, family members of people that are suffering from PTSD, the person themselves, but also the people that are interested in the therapy side of dealing with it. I think this would be a very interesting book, and I'm certainly going to be getting a copy myself. And hopefully this interview with you will also continue to spread that message that you're trying to spread. What would be your advice if somebody's watching this and where you were before you actually got help? What would be your message to them right now?
Keep fighting and speak, talk. You have to talk. You have to communicate. You have to tell somebody how you're feeling. Keeping it all inside, the worst thing you can do. We hear about all the time of people committing suicide. Nobody wants to say that word, but that's what happens. You have to communicate. Hopefully you have that spouse that you can talk to, that friend you can talk to, that worker you can talk to. And you got to keep fighting for yourself. You have to want to get better.
Brett Calman, thank you for being on the show and helping me to break the stigma. It's wonderful having you as a guest.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Disclaimer: the Bleeders Business Showcase Show is for entertainment purposes only and not professional advice. To inquire about something specific regarding the contents, we suggest you contact the guest speaker directly. Should you wish to apply to be a guest on the show, please contact Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman on factcpfa@gmail.com. Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman is founder of Heads Up CIO, a UK emergency response charity for cognitive psychological first aid, and is a highly experienced psychotherapist, executive business coach, and author of the book, Mind Over Terror, 3 Weeks, 2 Cities, 1 Mission. With over 10,000 hours of experience and academic degrees in government, law, clinical social work, and a postgraduate diploma in psychiatry with distinction, Dov is well placed to help you. He's also available for public speaking and corporate training.